Hi, Shari. It's a great pleasure to have you here today.
Oh, well, it's an
And
honor to be here with you.
Dr. Shari Geller is an author, a clinical psychologist, a certified mindfulness self compassion teacher, an EFT therapist, supervisor, and trainer. Shari is the co director of the Center for Mind Body Health in Toronto, where she offers training, supervision, and therapy in emotion focused therapy and mindfulness and self compassion modalities for individuals and couples. Shari has also co-authored and co-edited several books on therapeutic presence and self-compassion in psychotherapy. So I'm really, really happy to have this conversation with you about this really difficult, complex, but also painful topic on grieving. And actually, a recent loss of a very beloved family member inspired me to have this interview with you. And so, Shari, when someone is grieving the death of someone they're very close to and they love, it seems like the world is ending for them, right? And I often feel as a therapist, as a person, so speechless because no words can seem to feel helpful to say. What are the benefits of self compassion for those suffering the death of a loved one?
Yeah, grief is so painful. As you said, it feels like so many different ways it feels for people, like a deep pit, like I can't go on, like the whole body can't handle it, like shut down. There's so many different reactions falling to a dark hole. And it's so deeply painful and personal and yet universal. And I think part of where self compassion can be helpful is to have a way to bring warmth and kindness to some of that pain. I know here in North America, maybe it's similar in Europe, we live in a very death avoidant culture, even though it's the experience we all experience and are going to have, whether with ourselves or loved ones. So we don't often talk about grief and death and loss and how to be with it in a really skillful and kind way. So we might instead, when we feel that depth of pain, shut it off, numb it through addictions, become overwhelmed and shut down. There's so many kind of unhealthy responses we have because we don't know how to tolerate and be with that depth of pain. So I think self-compassion helps us find a way to bring kindness, um, understanding, mindfulness, warmth to some of the deep pain we experience so that we can be with it and process it and work through it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so easy to avoid, right? It's so
Yes.
easy. And I could see myself jumping into work, right? And so it's so easy to go away from that, right? And then, yeah, but it will catch up on us, right?
Yes, it does.
And so, what would you suggest what people can do when they find themselves distracted, right?
Yeah, I think bringing sometimes distraction, a healthy distraction is okay, right? We can't tolerate being in such depth of pain. We need to take a break, so to speak, but it's a conscious distraction, right? I'm going to work and I'm going to come back to this, or I'm going to, if I can, watch a Netflix something so I can get my mind off, but I need to take care of what's here, right? Or we can be more conscious, like I need to move this, so I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to talk with a friend. But within ourselves, I think being able to just notice, oh, there's suffering there. I'm aware there's suffering. And to bring some kind, warm awareness to the pain that we hold in our body around it, and to reach out to compassionate friends and people to be able to talk. I think grieving is something that we can bring kind and comfort and warmth to ourselves, but also be able to bring and share with others so we're not alone in it. The challenge is that other people may avoid it as much as we can avoid it, right? And they may avoid it by saying, oh, you'll get over this. Oh, they're safe in heaven now. oh, they're okay now, they're not in pain. And even though that sounds helpful, it's actually really distancing for the person who's in deep grief. What they need most of all is someone to be with them in their pain, and to be able to do that means to tolerate it. So I realize I'm going to a second part, which is someone to be with someone who is grieving. But coming back to your original question, it's being able to notice what's happening, being conscious about it, in the distraction, but also to be able to kind of bring some kindness, even putting a hand on our heart where we're hurting and saying, I want to be with you just like a dear friend. I just want to understand how deep this pain is and what you need.
Yeah. Coming from an Iranian culture, I feel like a lot of Iranians, or maybe more of the collective cultures, there's a lot of coming together, right? There's a lot of collective grieving. There's a lot of also suffering, right? And I sometimes feel like I'm wondering, is it too much of a suffering? Because it feels like you have to really cry out, right? You have to really suffer. Otherwise, you're not grieving enough, right?
Right. So you're almost talking about the opposite in a way. Is there an expectation because of the cultural rituals around grief? Is there, in a collectivist culture or an Iranian culture, is there an expectation you should feel this really deeply? And then there's an inauthenticity if you're not feeling it that way exactly, that I should feel it, which adds another layer of complexity to it.
Yeah, yeah. And how can I show compassion to that, right?
Right. So part of it is sometimes it's not just bringing compassion to our pain, but it's bringing to the challenge of the social pressure or expectations. I should feel a certain way, and bringing kindness to, yeah, that's hard. There's a lot of this external pressure, and it may not be what your experience is in this moment, and bringing kindness to some of that pressure that you're feeling, which is equally important with self-compassion. It's not always getting to the depth of the pain, but meeting, some of the other related difficulties we may have it with kindness and with warmth.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes, you might have really mixed feelings about the person you lost and who died, right? And in emotion focused therapy, we have this empty chair task where we actually ask clients to imagine the significant other and just see what comes up. And usually there are all sorts of feelings coming up. And sometimes people are confused when they feel angry towards someone they lost, right? Or they don't feel sad. How do you suggest to actually grieve the loss of a person you have mixed feelings towards?
I think it's a great question. And I think it's really important to actually work through the layers of whatever is poignant, whatever is meaningful in that moment. So if there's anger and hurt, it's important to work through that, bring compassion, do empty chair work in an EFT style, but being able to work through that layer. You can't just jump to grief because it might be inauthentic and not completely what someone's feeling, because there's this residual anger and hurt in the relationship, and then that gets really complex as well. So it's also about bringing awareness and kindness to the complexity. I feel different things, I feel a lot of anger and hurt. That's really real, and being able to express it, whether it be in an empty chair dialogue or otherwise, being able to work through and express it and normalize it. And then at some point it might be, or even simultaneously, there may be just the grief itself of the loss of the person. And sometimes there can be anger that's not just about a complex relationship before the person died, but just anger at the loss, and you just have to really honor all of the feelings, meet them with kindness and compassion, express them, listen to what the needs are underneath these feelings, because if we don't, we get stuck and everything gets really backed up, and then the anger and shut down or gets projected somewhere else, or to ourselves or in someone else in our lives. So it's really important to not have an expectation that grief should happen exactly this way, but that we open to be aware with curiosity and kindness and compassion to all that's arising.
And you said several times bringing kindness to that place, right?
Yes.
And I think that's very hard for a lot of people, right? To bring kindness to, how do you do that? How do you bring kindness to that place? How do you bring kindness to that anger, right?
Yeah, I think it's, and it might be warmth, it might be kindness, however the word's compassion, but I think emotions are difficult for people. And we live in also a very emotion avoidant kind of society. So I think this is a larger question in that way. But I think part of it is being able to even just noticing. So if we look at some of the history of particular approach that I teach, which is mindful self-compassion, that I know you're quite aware of, and is something developed by Kristen Neff and Chris Germer. And it has these three components, mindfulness, which is being aware of the suffering with acceptance, without judgment, whatever it is that's there, being aware of it. Common humanity, which is we're not alone. We all have grief. We all have complex feelings around grief. We all have anger and hurt and all of these emotions.
Yeah.
And then self-kindness, like really recognizing, yeah, it makes sense that you feel angry. It makes sense that you feel hurt and you feel grief. So, in the self-compassion language, you can go through a brief practice, and, we could even do that here if that's something we had time for, or, being able to meet what's there without saying, this is good, this is bad, I shouldn't feel this, I should feel this, but being able to just meet it with, again, that kind of compassion and curiosity so that we can open to it and express it. So it's a skill that takes time to learn. Sometimes being in a therapeutic relationship helps us to be able to do that, or with a compassionate other. But yes, of course, it's not easy. It's something, we need to develop, because to do that means we're also feeling and tolerating some of the emotions that are there.
Absolutely.
And that's difficult for people.
Totally. Yeah. And it would be great if we later on come to a small practice to that. But I think you mentioned something very important, because sometimes when we're grieving, or we go through a sudden death or an awful experience, we feel like, why is this happening to me? As if like I'm alone in this world, right? As if I'm the only person this is happening. And the common humanity aspect of self-compassion, this is so soothing, right? Reminding ourselves that we all go through grief at some point in our lives in different ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it reminds me, when you're talking about this, there's a teaching story in Buddhism, and I'm going to paraphrase it, and I'm probably going to mess it up a little bit. But the idea is there's this woman who lost their child and was in incredible deep grief and couldn't handle the level of pain, and went to either the Buddha, or maybe it was a master, I can't remember, but went to a monk up in the hills, I think that's what it was, and said, please help me, I need to, relieve this grief, it's so awful. And the monk or the Buddha said to this woman, okay, you have one task, go around to the villages and bring me back a mustard seed from any household that has not lost someone, or has not been able to, that has not faced death in some way. She did this journey and went around and came back empty-handed and said, I understand, grief is in all of us. And there was a sense of just comfort in the fact that we're not alone in this experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A few years ago, I was going through another loss, and my mentor, Lars Ostra, brought in a quotation of Les Greenberg, the founder of EFT, who said, after the loss of his wife, this kind of, when you love someone, hold it tight, but when it's time to let go, let go, let go.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. I probably messed it up as well, but
Yeah.
it touched me of, when it's time to also to let go, right? This ability to let go is so difficult, right? But also bringing awareness of, when we love someone, to hold it tight, is right.
Yes.
Sometimes we grieve the loss of someone who is alive, right? Such as grieving the loss of a mother who was never emotionally available for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
loss of a childhood in the way that we deserved it, or the unmet needs of us in our life. Which role does self-compassion play in this kind of grieving?
Yeah, I think in some ways it's similar to what we spoke about before with the complexity of grief of someone who has died that you have complex feelings with. Similarly, if there's grief around, not having the parents that I needed, or grief around friendships or complex relationships, or people treated me a certain way, you can't just jump to grief. You need to be able to work through the layers that are before that, the anger, the hurt feelings, the unexpressed and unmet need, of feeling cared for as I deserve to feel, or loved as I deserve to feel. And then grieving is kind of the last stage. And in a way, what self-compassion can help us to do is to, again, meet all of those feelings along the way without judgment and with curiosity and kindness and warmth, so that we can express them and work them through, so that we can ultimately grieve. If we jump too far to grieving without honoring all those other feelings, it won't be real. It won't be a real process. There'll probably be a lot of residual anger and hurt that hasn't been properly processed. So we need to be able to meet some of all of these painful feelings on that path with compassion.
Yeah, yeah. Though I think a lot of people find it very difficult to let go of something that is still alive, right? Because
there's a possibility or a
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, but I think the aspect of really meeting with warmth and letting us to feel all sorts of feelings that come with that, right? And just allowing it to be there and not distracting or pushing it away.
Or having an expectation of what we should feel in that circumstance.
Absolutely. Yes. Or having an expectation of that it's enough to grieve, right? When I look at now the diagnosis criteria for, yeah, when grieving should stop according to the DSM, right?
Yes, and there's a lot of controversy around
Yeah,
that.
there's an grief, I don't know, there's a specific time slot, time frame. Otherwise, you kind of being diagnosed with a mental illness, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of pressure on people feeling what's wrong with me that I'm still grieving, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So can you give an example on how to practice self-compassion while grieving?
Sure. Why don't I walk us through a brief practice, and for people who are listening, they can walk through that practice as well if they wish, or they can just tune out or turn off, whatever's needed.
Yes,
So would you be open to practicing with me in this moment as a way of practicing?
absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So even just taking a moment, you can close your eyes to bring your attention inward, or eyes open, looking at the ground, just bringing your attention first to your breath, just to feel without forcing it, just what natural breathing feels like in the body right now. And you may even take a couple long exhalations just to help your body settle a little bit more. And if it feels okay for you, just bringing to mind a loss that you're struggling with. And maybe for the purposes of this brief practice, it could be a level 5 loss rather than a level 10, but intensity, but just a loss. Could be a death, someone dear and loved to you. It could be a difficult relationship or friendship, or an unmet need growing up. And if there's a whole bunch of contenders, just choose one issue and spend a moment to just become aware of this loss and how you may be experiencing it, how it's impacting you. And then bringing this first component of mindfulness that we spoke about before, by just becoming aware in the body of where you may be experiencing the difficulty, the pain, the suffering around this loss, letting go of the person or the story, but just where you might be feeling it in your body and how you might be feeling it, and just bringing a kind curiosity. Maybe it's a slight twisting in your chest or a pit in your stomach. Just noticing it without judgment. Breathing around it. Maybe even validating it, like, oh yeah, this is painful. This is a moment of suffering. Bringing a validating, kind acknowledgement of where and how you're feeling that in the body. And then bringing an awareness of common humanity. Like, I'm not alone in this. Other people in the world have experienced loss or grief of this nature. It's part of being human, and just feeling the interconnection. You might even feel it with each other right now as we're all practicing together around our own losses, or even expanding to the wider world of human loss and suffering. You're not alone. And breathing and just acknowledging that common humanity. And then bringing some self-kindness. If you haven't already, you can put a hand on your body where you feel that pain and suffering, or just a kind awareness to the suffering. And just like you would approach a dear friend, perhaps those words like, hey, I'm with you. I want to understand your pain. You're not alone. Whatever kind words or phrases or touch you can bring to the suffering, just spending a moment with that now. And if there's any difficulty in any of these steps, just bring in some kind compassion to the difficulty. Like, this is hard to do. Just bring in some kind understanding and warmth to how difficult even this kind of practice is. Trusting wherever you are is absolutely okay. And if it feels right, you can have one final question, which is, what do I need, or what does this pain or suffering need? And just listening if anything emerges. And if not, that's okay. And letting go of the intentionality of the practice. Maybe taking a quiet moment just for a second, just to notice what that practice was like for you, what you're aware of. And when you're ready, just opening your eyes a little more fully, returning to the virtual room, to each other. Thank you for your practice and just taking a moment to bring some kind awareness to your own experience for whoever is joining us. And thank you, Ghazaleh.
Thank you, Shari. This was really beautiful. Really, really beautiful. Really appreciate you guiding us through this. Also, it's a practice we can do every day, right? Even in the moment, at work, when the pain comes up, or in the train, all right, to really just pay attention to that and then go through these aspects of self-compassion, the mindfulness, the common humanity, right?
Yes, it's a mobile practice or a mobile thing we can take a few moments to do with each other and with ourselves.
Thank you for sharing your time and with us and being here with me today.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate and honor you for inviting me and being here, but also for bringing attention to grief, because it is, as you said, touches all of us.
I hope you enjoyed watching this video with Dr. Shari Geller. And remember, grieving is complex and very personal, and there is no time limit or the right way of grieving. I hope you found this helpful, and if so, please subscribe and see you at my next video.